Hi, I'm Linda Cabota Bird, and I've been a personal growth consultant for over 20 years. I use astrology, energy psychology, Stargate, inner child work, NLP. I know, kind of unusual modalities, but I also use other things to help my clients get to know themselves better and to strengthen their relationship with their inner knowing. So I was thrilled to be able to talk about this topic today. So we're going to talk about what is your inner knowing and where does it come from? And this is where astrology has helped me to come up with some greater understanding of what our inner knowing actually is. It's been said that the longest journey you will ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart. And I think that our inner knowing comes from our heart, but it's a little less, it's a little more complicated than just that. So we have some research, or I don't know if you're familiar with heart math, but heart math has done a lot of research on the intelligence of the heart. And what it's found is that we have 60% more energy, or the electromagnetic field in the heart is 60 times more powerful than the energy in the brain. So they've also found that the heart communicates with the brain much more often than the brain communicates with the heart. So when we talk about the importance of the heart, there's actually scientific backing for that. But the journey can be kind of arduous, or we don't always know where we're going. And so this is where it's very, very helpful to have a personal map. And that's where the astrology or the astrological chart is a map, an actual, like an owner's manual that helps you to understand how you're wired and how to actually negotiate that journey from your head to your heart. So is your heart your inner knowing? And what I've noticed, or what I've come to the conclusion of, at least for right now, is that we have biases, or we have different filters in which we access our heart, or how our heart operates. So Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, all fire signs, have a heart that's maybe a little bit more instinctual, more impulsive. It's very passionate. And so that's the kind of heart that fire signs have. Taurus, Virgos, and Capricorns it's an earth, they're earth signs. And so they have much more practical and grounded way of looking at life. And then Geminis, Libras, and Aquarians have their energies in air. And so airs are much more conceptual, intellectual, that kind of thing, a little more removed, emotionally removed. And then Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are just the opposite, very much in touch with the energy field, with their feelings and so forth. So these alone, I think, are not really our inner knowing, but they're a way or a filter in which we access our inner knowing. But it also comes through the life experiences, maybe not just this life, but other life experiences, and even our ancestors' life experiences. So we have a lot of information that lives within our heart as far as information or data. And so where I think the true inner knowing comes from is a combination of that and what I'm calling consciousness, or our connection to the spiritual realm, whether it is our spirit guides, our angels, um, our higher self, God, however we want to call our consciousness. But it is something that I think is an essential ingredient in really trusting our inner knowing. So in my mind, I kind of pictured that we have our heart, and then deep in our heart, we have this consciousness piece that makes our inner knowing valid. So if we change perception, you change the world. And that is not only our personal world, but the world at large, because our personal world, or our personal energy, contributes to the morphic field. or to what the world is in itself. And so I think this is really important for us to be doing our inner work so that we can contribute at a higher vibration. And where the perceptions come from, they're filtered through our gender, race, religion, culture, education, and our unconscious tendencies that show up in our birth chart. And so that's why it's helpful to understand what those unconscious tendencies are. So what is astrology? Quantum physics is showing us that everything is energy. And so even the planets and the asteroids and the things we use to help us to understand ourselves through our charts are energy. And many years ago, I was attending a science and consciousness conference, and Dr. John Hagelin who's a physicist, was presenting, and he said that research shows that different planets affect different parts of our brains. He said, lending credibility to astrology. And so, of course, I was thrilled because I know astrology works. I've used it for a long time. But to have it kind of validated and to give me some idea as to how it worked was very, very validating and exciting. So what the chart is, it's a map of the sky at the moment of the birth. And so this is actually for the moment of the Simply Happy Woman Summit. And because you can make a chart, because everything's energy, right? You can make a chart for anything at the moment of its birth or when it starts. So how does it work? I was also excited to hear that I was going to be presenting on the Crown Chakra Day because the poet Rumi, 13th century poet, wrote, "The universe and the light of the stars come through me." And as an astrologer, I always think of the starlight coming through our crown chakra and illuminating our body. So it seemed quite appropriate to be speaking today. So your natal chart, what is your natal chart? Like I said, it's a snapshot of the sky when you were born. And what it depicts is I call it your personal software program. So when you're born, I see that as you get inserted, your own software program. And what the chart is, it's like a printout of your owner's manual or your map of how you're wired. So we have the planets here, and planets are like the members of your inner committee or players in your play, and they all have a job to do. And they're influenced by the sign that they're in, the astrological sign they're in. We'll talk more about this in just a minute. But what I want to emphasize here is that we're so much more than just our sun sign. We actually have an inner committee. But do your committee members all get along? And I love this little picture because it kind of depicted that we have different kinds of members of our committee. And one of my favorite workshops to facilitate is meet and befriend your inner committee. Because I think we've all experienced where we feel like part of me wants to do that, but part of me doesn't. And part of me is thinking this, etc. And we have this like debate that goes on in our heads. And it's really helpful to know who those debaters are or what this inner committee is composed of. And so we have the different members have different jobs. And so I used to work for Colgate, so I came out of the corporate world. And what I've done is I've created like a little org chart, I guess you could call it, for our planets. So the sun is the CEO, and it's a boss. It should be. It doesn't always have control, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then the moon is our emotional feelings. And so I thought human resources is in charge of the people, right, in the company. And then Mercury is in charge of communications. Venus is our values, our sense of aesthetics. So it seems like that would be good for marketing. Mars is in charge of sales because Mars is our will, how we interact with the outer world. Jupiter is about expansion. It exaggerates everything it comes in contact with. Saturn, I assigned as the CFO. Saturn is the planet of keeping us in touch with reality. So the CFO often says, how much does that cost? Or we need to budget for that kind of thing. And then Uranus is the planet of innovation. And so research and development seem like the appropriate title for Uranus. Neptune, spiritual advisor, and Pluto. Pluto is, I think of Pluto as the planet that comes in to keep our soul on track for what we wanted to accomplish in this lifetime. So he's the chairman of the board. He's outside of the company or the story, and he's just kind of the overseer, you might say. And then the ascendant. The ascendant is in charge of public relations, and I'll talk about this in a second. Also, the planets all have jobs, but they're also influenced by the sign that they're in. For instance, Mars in Aries. Aries rules Mars, so it's at its purest form. And so Mars is warrior energy. So if somebody has their Mars in Aries, they don't hesitate. They just go out and they get what they want, or they attempt to get what they want at least. And then Mars in Scorpio is also the same, has the same job, but Mars in Scorpio is much more subtle, much more, you might say, I don't want to say manipulative, but it's much more cunning, I guess you would say. It's much more feeling. And then Mars in Capricorn is very measured. It's practical. There's an actual plan for how it's going to go about getting what it wants. So you can see where the same committee member has the same job, but how they go about it depends on the sign that they're in. And also, we look at the big three. The big three in astrology is the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. And these are all, if you just know the big three about people, you will know a lot about them. When I go to astrology conferences, we put our name and our big three on our name tag. And it's always interesting because you look and you see that who you see is there's so much more to that person. So it's always really helpful. Also, the sun is our core energy and it's our core essence. But sometimes I think life is a game and we agree to certain rules. And whatever our sun is somehow not considered okay. For instance, I have my sun in Aries, and the fire signs are all masculine. And so when I came in, I was a really active little girl. I was more like a tomboy. And to be a sun in Aries and an Asian female, it's almost like an oxymoron. So I had to learn to be more reserved. And what I learned, or what I made up as a little child, was that who I was not okay. And so I learned to be able to cover up, and all of us have our own version of that. And so the cover-ups could be, we learned our rising sign or our ascendant, which is our public personality. And so we'll talk about that more in a second. But what this does is it taught us how to present ourselves in a different way than what our sun was. Also, our moon, I mentioned earlier, is our emotional security. And so our moon is another way in which we interacted with our mothers and how we got attention from our mothers. So our moon is another way that kind of covered up what our sun is. It's where we went for emotional security. So I thought it'd be fun for you to put in the chat what your sun sign is. And your sun is, if you say I'm a Aries, then you would put Aries as your sun sign. And some of you may even know your moon sign or your rising sign. If you do, go ahead and put that in the chat. It's fun to know what the audience consists of. So the ascendant, just so you know where we get the ascendant is the constellation that was on the horizon at the time of your birth. So in this case, we find the ascendant at the 9 o'clock position on a chart is in Taurus. And so this person was taught to be very practical, loyal, methodical, etc. Also, the ascendant, as I mentioned, is your personality. And it's a role you played in your family. And it's very, very deeply embedded, because if you didn't play this role, then the fear was you would be thrown out and you would die. You're a little tiny child. And so you learned very closely or very strongly what you needed to behave, how you needed to present yourself. And so, and it's also what you came in to learn. So there's purpose in all of this. Um, and so what we came in to learn, say for instance, you have a water sign on your ascendant, you came in to learn to read energy. We call you psychics in training. Or if you came in with an earth on your site, your ascendant, you came in to learn to be helpful and to be practical and so forth. So we have a personality that we put out to the world that may not be who we really are. It's something that we pretend to be. And right now we have a lot of people who are coming to me saying, I'm tired of pretending. I really want to live a more authentic life, because I think humanity is evolving and we're moving more into wanting to be more sincerely who we came to be. And then I said the moon is our emotional security. So this might be slightly off course, but I do think this is really important information. If you remember nothing else about this presentation, I hope you'll take this information away with you. And what this is it's how we act when we're emotionally overcome, or we have too much emotion going on. And so fire moons will explode. They have quick tempers, and which can be very, very disconcerting if the person is, the rest of their chart is they're very calm and contained and so forth. But sometimes if they just have too many feelings going on, they'll explode. They yell, they pound their fist, they even throw things. And for the rest of us who are kind of cowering in a corner and trying to figure out, if I did that, it would mean, because our only frame of reference is ourself. But when you understand astrology, you understand that we're wired differently, and that person has a fire moon. They have to release the energy like that, and then they're okay. I don't know if you know anybody like that who have quick tempers, but once they explode, then they're fine, and they're wondering why you are, acting so timid around them, because it's just what they do. Earth moons can get very, very busy. And we all have our own flavor of this, depending on what actual sign it's in. For instance, this might be a Virgo moon. Virgo moons are very discerning, very particular, and clean. And so if they have a lot of emotion or a lot of feelings going on, then they will get busy doing something, getting busy. And so it's helpful to understand that. Say, for instance, if you have a Virgo moon and you're cleaning your bathroom with a toothbrush, then you might stop and ask yourself, what feeling am I avoiding? What's really going on here? What's down below the surface? What's that part where we connect to our inner knowing? Because these are all deflective things that we do to prevent us from dropping into deeper feelings. And then air moons are very in their heads. And so they can either want to talk to you about it, whatever's going on, but it's usually surface. Air moons are typically pretty talkative, but they can go into their heads and they obsess over what's going on. And they think and think, and they try to understand what's happening so that they don't have to drop into their deeper feelings. And then water, this is very kind of confusing, because water moons can look like they're in their feelings, but they're actually in their emotional state if they're crying, or they're withdrawing, or they're acting like to leave me alone. And so all of these styles are to keep us from dropping into the deeper feelings or a connection to our higher self, to actually even to each other. And so it's helpful to understand these different styles when you interact with other people. And then, of course, our sun. The sun is our essence. It's what we love to do, and it's what makes us happy. When we're operating from our sun sign, then we're in a happy place. And that is if you've kind of gotten over your conditioning patterns, where, for instance, I'm an Aries, and I was taught that, as I said, that energy wasn't okay. And I used to not really like Aries because, they were just too much. But now that I've done work, I enjoy being an Aries. So it's when it's unconscious, it can show up in the lower vibration. When it's conscious, you can actually use this energy from a higher place. And so nobody is just one sign or another. We're all a mixture of different energies. And so when I look at an astrology chart, I kind of look at it as energy soup. It's like, what does this person have for ingredients, and how are they cooked together, and so forth. And besides just the planets, we also have other things that we include which add flavoring to it. And so we're quite complex, and this is what makes us unique. And the important thing is to understand that there's never been anybody like you, nor will there ever be another person like you, that you are unique by your energy signature, and that you have something important to add to the symphony of life with your uniqueness. So I thought we'd talk about Venus today because it's Valentine's Day. And Venus is how we give and receive love. It's also our values. So I thought this was kind of fun to just put down what kind of vacation you might enjoy. So if you have Venus in a fire sign, you might enjoy this cruise, because Venus in fire signs love adventure. And I chose this cruise because if you have a Leo Venus, you actually like luxury too. And if you have your Venus in Earth, then an African safari just would be like a wonderful thing on your bucket list, something that you would love to do. Or air. Airs love to actually be in the air. So I thought this would be a fun thing to have, to be in a hot air balloon. Airs also like to think and conceptualize and do things with their minds. And then water Venuses love to be near water, and even better if they're in the water. So if you can just stop and think for a second, which one would you like? And of course, I think most of us would like to any of these things, because we're a combination of all these different elements. But I will tell myself, I don't have any desire to go on an African safari. I have no earth in my chart, which kind of tells you, other things about yourself. If you're missing an element, then one of these things might not look exciting at all to you. So I thought this might be a fun place to take time to reflect. So I'm going to ask you, how do you show love? Now, this is something you may not have even thought about, but it's important to consider. And how you know when you are loved. And I'm just going to give you just a second to think about this while I take a sip of water. Just knowing this is very, very helpful when you're relating to others. And I think it'd be really helpful for marriage counselors to understand. Because say you have a person who has their Venus in Earth. Earth Venuses love, they know they're loved when somebody helps them with something that can make their lives easier, or somebody hugs them a lot, or rubs their back, or is more physical with them. Whereas if that Earth Venus is married to an air Venus, the air Venus, air Venuses are more verbal. And so picture these two people in the counselor's office, and the woman is saying, You know, I don't think you love me. And the husband is saying, I tell you all the time. And she's thinking, that doesn't mean anything to me because you never show me. And so if these two people could understand the two different ways they express love, can you see how that would be really helpful in them getting to know each other on a different level? The same thing for fire Venuses. They like to be to have attention and to be. If you're a Leo Venus, I had a client who once expressed to me that she needed to be worshipped and adored. And I thought she was serious, and I thought, wow, you know, if you're an Earth Venus, you would never think of that because that's just like, whoa, really? But we all have our own needs. A water Venus is needs to feel you. It's energy, not necessarily physically, but just to feel the energy. For instance, if two water Venuses are going on a long trip, they can drive for miles and miles without saying a word. It's the energy between them that reassures them that they're loved. Interesting, isn't it? Also, what kind of gifts do you like most? Um, this is really helpful. I have friends, a couple who are friends, and she's Earth Venus and he's an Air Venus. So he wanted to buy her this very expensive, really, really nice ring, but he asked her first, and she said, "No, I don't. I would hardly ever wear that, and that'd be just a waste of money." She said, "I'd rather spend that on landscaping our backyard." And so, or re-landscaping. They had a beautiful yard, but she wanted to re-landscape it. So you can see how this would could be possibly problematic. Luckily, they've been married for a lot of years, so he knew to ask her first. But just imagine if he'd come home with this very expensive ring, and the reception would not be what he was expecting. Example of that would be I had a client who had her Venus in um, water, and her husband, they were newlyweds, and her husband had his in earth. And so on Christmas Day, he was so excited with the gift he purchased for her. He was just could hardly wait till she opened it, but she wanted to wait to the end to make it the grand climax of Christmas morning. So when she opened her gift, she pulled out a meat grinder. Well, she was so upset. She said she cried. She was so embarrassed. She said, all in front of my whole family. She said she cried. She went to her room. She was so upset. And her husband, you know, poor guy, he just didn't know what he did wrong, because this would have been a perfect gift for him. But because Venus is in Earth, like things that are practical, something that would make their lives easier. But she had hers in water. She wanted something sentimental, something that had some kind of emotional connection to it. And so you can also see where this can be a problem, or it can be advantageous when you know the sign or the element that the Venus is in. And even when I go to a party or to a dinner or something and I want to take a hostess gift, if I have their chart, I will look and see what their Venus is in, so that I'll know what kind of gift they might appreciate. So my free gift to you is to give you your chart and a report that will tell you what planet, what sign your planet is in. So you'll have the bare minimum to know this information about how you're wired. So tips for strengthening your innate inner knowing. One is know thyself. And I think this is so important for not only your inner knowing, but also just for your own happiness. When you get to know yourself, and like I say, you embrace who you are instead of trying to be like other people, then you're just going to be a happier person, and you're making a greater contribution to, as I said, the morphic field. Pay attention to your heart. Like I said, your heart is, I think, where the inner knowing lives, but pay attention to the deeper knowing. Just, it's like, I think you'll all you all have experiences where you just know something. You don't know why you know it, you just know it. And that's from your inner knowing, and it comes through your heart. And then spend time in nature or be quiet or meditate, whatever it is, to help you to listen. I've heard it said that when we pray, we're talking to God, and when we're quiet, we're actually listening. And so the inner knowing comes through listening. And then live in the present moment. I just read something that said that we spend 80% of our time we're considering the past, thinking about the past, and only 10 to 15% of the time in the present moment. And actually, that's all there is, really. It's just the present, right? And then 5 to 10% in the future. So the inner knowing comes through the present moment. So be mindful of spending more time being present. And then do a morning reset. And I said this as a morning reset, but you can do this anytime. And it's called heart assisted therapy. And the heart assisted therapy is something that the Dr. John Deeple, who created the therapy, said that it actually is like a reboot for your body. So would you like for me to show you how to do this? I'll just show you. It's very fast. What we're going to do is we're just going to take our hands, put them over our heart, and you'll say, deep in my heart, I love and accept myself. And you're to breathe 3 times. Then you'll flip your hands, and you'll say that again, because we're going to work on both sides of the brain. It's going to be deep in my heart, I love and accept myself. And you breathe 3 times. And then flip your hands one more time. Deep in my heart, I love and accept myself. 3 more breaths. Did you feel better? Yeah. So that's a wonderful thing to do in the morning to start your day. And then keep a gratitude journal. Gratitude journals, I think, are really, really helpful to keep us in the mindset of gratitude. And so when you're counting your blessings, then you get more. It's kind of wherever we focus, we get more of, right? And so I think, keeping a gratitude journal gives you an attitude of gratitude. And again, that's the frequency in which the inner knowing comes through. And then keep a synchronicity journal. This doesn't have to be elaborate, you could just keep note on your phone or something when you have synchronicities. And I think this is the way for our guidance or our spirit to give us signals that we're on track, that we're in the flow. Because things don't just kind of accidentally happen, right? So synchronicities, when you have a lot of synchronicities, it's just, to me, it's just exciting because it says, yeah, you're in the flow. And then morning pages. Morning pages I learned from Julia Cameron from her book, The Artist's Way. And what she has us do is every morning you write 3 pages longhand. And it doesn't matter if the grammar or the punctuation or anything, or even legibility. You just write out whatever is going on in your head in the morning. And then I'd leave some space open and ask, is there anything you want to tell me? Because as you do this, you'll find that you're kind of writing to your higher self or to your angels or to God, whomever, but you're writing this, it'll start to appear that you're writing to somebody else. And when you open a dialogue with your higher knowing or your inner knowing, then it gives you an avenue for you to be able to actually get more clear messages. And then being of service. Being of service is, I think, another way to kind of get out of our own story and to open ourselves to the broader field of energy. I think all of us have had the experience of doing something for another, and just the joy and the feeling that comes from that is something that you can't buy. So consider being of service. So until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so the more conscious you can make your chart or the default settings in your chart, the more bandwidth you open up for the consciousness or the messages to come through from your inner knowing or higher knowing, whatever you want to call it. So if you have any questions, or if you'd like to take advantage of the free chart and report, just contact me through my website, Conscious Awakening Coach, or also Personal Growth Consultant. I have both. I was so excited to find this URL was available that I bought it, and I told my webmaster that that I got it, and she said, "Oh no." She said, "No." She was a client of mine too, and she said, "No, you wake people up. You need to have that in your URL." So even though I know this is not grammatically correct, but so I have both, whichever one you'd like to use. And also my special bonus offer is 20% off of any of my consultations or any of my services. So you can look and see on my website what I offer. And then the experiential workshop, Meet and Befriend Your Inner Committee. I'm looking to put this together. I've not done it online before. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun now that we have very fancy technology. I think that we could do this. And of course, I'll offer you special pricing as a simply happy woman. So it is time to be simply happy. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm just going to say namaste and wishing you all the best.